right, let's do number 3. So whenever we have square roots, we want to isolate our radical. So what should I do first? Before I can square both sides, I need to get the radical all by itself. So what do I need to do? Subtract 7. So we have negative square root of 2x plus 3 is equal to 5. What would we do next? Before I square both sides, what do I have to do? I have to get rid of that negative. Divide by negative 1. So it cancels out with the negative. So we have the square root of 2x plus 3 is equal to negative 5. What would I do next? Square both sides. So it cancels out. So 2x plus 3 is equal to 25. From here, we just solve for x. Let's subtract 3 on both sides. We get 2x is equal to 22. Divide by 2. X is equal to 11. What do I need to do next? What do the directions say? Check for extraneous solutions. How do I check here? Plug it in. We're going to plug it into x. See if it works. So 7 minus the square root of 2 times 11 plus 3 is equal to 12. So this would be 22 plus 3 would be 25. What's the square root of 25? 5. What's 7 minus 5? 2. Does 2 equal 12? No. So does 11 work? No. So what do you think our answer here is? No solution. No real solution. So if your only answer does not work, that means your answer is going to be no real solution. So every time you have radicals or fractions, you always need to check for extraneous solutions. Plug your answer back in. For number 5, if I have a square root equals a square root, what would I do? Square both sides, so the square roots cancel. So we're just setting everything under the square root equal to each other. So 3x minus 5 is equal to 4x minus 11. What do we do next? I'm going to combine my like terms. So move our x's to one side and the constants to the other. 6 equals x. What do I need to do next? Plug it in. Let's check and see if it works. So the square root of 3 times 6 minus 5 is equal to the square root of 4 times 6 minus 11. So 3 times 6 would be 18 minus 5 is 13. So square root 13. 4 times 6 is 24 minus 11 would be 13. Square root 13 equals square root 13. Yes, so it works. So let's take a look at number 4. So whenever we have a radical, we want to isolate our radical. Get it all by itself. So what should I do first? Divide by 3. So the square root of x plus 4 is equal to 3. What would we do next? Square both sides to get rid of the square root. So x plus 4 is equal to, what's 3 squared? 9. And next, subtract 4. So x is equal to 5. For these questions too, you need to check your work. So plug it back into the x. So we have 3 times the square root of 5 plus 4 is equal to 9. So 3 times the square root of 9 equals 9. What's the square root of 9? 3 times 3 is what? 9 equals 9. Is that true? Yes. So 5 works as an answer. So for all of your square root ones, you need to plug it back in to the original question, work it out, and see if it works. So for number 2, you had a question like this from the quiz. So you might see it on the test. We need to multiply by the conjugate of the denominator. So the conjugate of the denominator, the sign in the middle changes. This would be negative 5i minus 1. So whatever we multiply to the bottom, we also have to multiply to the top. Negative 5i minus 1. On the top, we're going to FOIL it out. So we get negative 40i squared minus 8i plus 15i plus 3. What do I do whenever I have an I squared? Changes to be negative 1. And negative 1 times negative 40 would be positive 40. So then we can combine our like terms. Let's start with the real parts. 40 plus 3 is 43. Then our imaginary parts, negative 8i plus 15i would be plus 7i. On the bottom, you can FOIL it out or you can use your conjugate shortcut. So we have a squared minus b squared. So our a squared would be negative 5i squared minus our b squared would just be 1 squared. So this would be 25i squared minus 1. What's I squared turn into? Negative 1. So negative 25 minus 1 would be negative 26. So this would be our answer. So for a question like number 6, if you have a fraction equals a fraction, what would we do? Cross multiply. For a question like number 5, I did this in the video, but if you have a square root equals a square root, what would we do? Square both sides, and then they just cancel out. So you just set the insides equal to each other. 7, we would cross multiply too. The only thing that's not in the review that you might see on the test is just regular solving, so like solving quadratics. So make sure you know how to solve quadratics. So just like the quiz, yeah. So solving quadratics, you would try to factor. What do we do if it doesn't factor? Quadratic formula. So make sure you know the quadratic formula for the test tomorrow. So know everything from the quiz plus the review. All right, last question we're going to do is number 6. So when we have a fraction equals a fraction, we cross multiply. So we get 5 times x plus 4 is equal to negative 8 times x minus 2. So that you just keep the equal sign in the middle and just cross multiply. Next, we want to distribute. So we get 5x plus 20 is equal to, again, we distribute here, negative 8x plus 16. We're going to move our x's to one side, so I'm going to add 8x and move the constants to the other, so subtract 20. So we get 13x is equal to negative 4. Lastly, we divide by 13, so x is equal to negative 4 over 13. And you can just leave it as a fraction, so that would be your answer. Right, so let's take a look at number 11. We need to solve, graph, and write your answer in interval notation. So looking at 11, we see that we don't have any x squared, so we know that we just need to get our x's on one side and the constant numbers on the other. So what should I do first? Distribute the 7. So we have 7x plus 28 and 38 plus 5x greater than. What would I do next? I can move the 28 to the other side, so subtract 28. And that means I'm going to have to move the 5x to the right. So we'll subtract 5x. So 38 minus 28 would be 10 is greater than 2x. What do we do next? Divide by 2. So 5 is greater than x. Or if you wanted to rewrite it, you could say x is less than 5. I usually like it when the x comes first, but it doesn't matter. It's just personal preference. So let's put it on a number line. So we need to put our key point 5. At 5, do I have an open circle or closed circle? Open circle, because it's just a less than sign. So as a reminder, if we have less than or greater than, we put an open circle. If it's less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, it gets a closed circle. And open circles get parentheses, closed circles get brackets. So now, which direction do I need to color? What am I talking about? Values that are less than 5. So it's going to go to the left. We're talking about numbers less than 5. If you wanted to, plug in a number and see what makes sense. Plug in something less than 5. 4 is less than 5, so that's true. So I'm going to color in the direction of 4. So that's half of our answer. The other half is we have to write it in interval notation. So my arrow is pointing in which direction? To the left, which means we're talking about positive infinity or negative infinity? Negative infinity. So my interval is going to be from negative infinity. And where does my line stop? 5. Does 5 get a parenthesis or bracket? Parenthesis, because it's an open circle. So this would be our interval notation. So this is part of our answer, the number line. All the questions on the test are going to ask you to graph it on a number line and for your interval notation. So you need these two things. Remember, when you write your interval notation, it's always from smallest to largest. So negative infinity, talking about all the negative numbers, so numbers that are super small. So that's going to be your smallest. 5 is larger. Let's do 13. What should I do first for 13? Distribute the 8. So we have 8 minus 32x is greater than or equal to 60. What's next? Minus 8. So negative 32x is greater than or equal to 52. Then we divide by negative 32. What do I have to remember to do when I divide by a negative number? Flip the sign. So our sign goes from greater than or equal to now less than or equal to. So anytime you divide by a negative number, you have to flip the sign. So now let's simplify our fraction. 52 divided by negative 32. They're both divisible by 4. Yeah. So 4 goes into 52. How many times? 13 over negative 8. So negative 13 over 8. So when we put this on a number line, my key point is going to be at negative 13 over 8. Which direction? Well, am I going to put a closed circle or open circle? Closed circle, because it's less than or equal to, so we put a closed circle at our point. And which direction am I going to color or highlight? To the left. We're talking about values less than. So less than means it's to the left. Now let's write our interval notation. So our arrow's pointing in which direction? To the left, which is positive infinity or negative? Negative infinity. So what's our interval going to start with? Negative infinity with a parenthesis, because infinity always gets parenthesis. And then our graph ends at negative 13 over 8. Does that get a parenthesis or brackets? Bracket. Go ahead. So because it's a closed circle, we put a bracket at our number. Parentheses always get, infinities always get parentheses. So this would be part of our answer, and this would be part of our answer. What should I do first? Distribute the negative, or distribute the numbers. We're going to distribute first. So here I have negative 12x plus 6 minus 7 is greater than or equal to, what is 1/3 times 9? 3x. And what is 1/3 times 12? 4. So 3x plus 4 minus 8. What should I do next? Combine like terms. I'm going to combine the like terms on the same side, so we don't flip the signs or anything. We just do exactly what it says. So 6 minus 7 would be -1. And 4 minus 8 would be -4. What's next? I'm going to subtract 3x to move it to the other side, and I'm also going to add 1. So move our x's to one side, constants to the other. So we have negative 15x is greater than or equal to -3. What do we do next? Divide by -15. Awesome. If you divide by a negative, you have to flip the sign. So x, instead of greater than, we're going to flip it to less than or equal to. So flip the sign when you divide by a negative. Can I simplify -3 over -15 to what? Positive 1 over 5. Perfect. Let's put it on our number line. So we have 1/5. Which direction am I going to highlight? X is less than 1/5. Which value's to the left? Awesome. So we're going to color into the left. Do I put an open circle or a closed circle at 1/5? Closed circle because it's less than or equal to. Now let's write our interval. What's our interval going to start with? Awesome. Negative infinity because it's pointing to the left, so it's going in the direction of negative infinity. With a parentheses, because infinities always get parentheses. Where does our graph end? 1/5. Does it get a bracket or parentheses? Bracket, because it's a closed circle. So this is part of our answer, and this is the other part. So let's go back up to number 9. So we always want to find our least common denominator first. So we want to find the factors of all of our denominators and multiply by what's missing. So let's factor our third piece here. What does x squared minus 9 factor into? X minus 3, x plus 3. So our least common denominator is x minus 3 times x plus 3. So we multiply by what's missing. Yes. So what am I going to multiply my first fraction by? X plus 3. Because it has an x minus 3 from the bottom, so we don't need to multiply the x minus 3. What's missing from my second fraction? X minus 3. So I'm going to multiply the x minus 3. What's missing from the third fraction? Neither. They have both. So we don't multiply anything there. So I'm going to write my new equation. I have 6 times x plus 3, x minus 2 times x minus 3, and that's equal to 36. So 6 times x plus 3 plus x minus 2 times x minus 3 is equal to 36. What would I do next? I'm going to distribute the 6. I also have to FOIL out the middle. So we have 6x plus 3 plus, when we FOIL here, we get x squared minus 3x minus 2x plus 6 is equal to 36. What can we do next? Combine like terms. So I'm going to start with my highest degree. Let's start with x squared because I'm also just going to put it in standard form. 6x minus 3x would be 3x. Minus 2x would just be x. And then 3 plus 6 would be 9. Is equal to 36. Oh, sorry, that should be 18, right? I forgot to distribute. So this should be 18 here. 18 plus 6 is 24. That's equal to 36. What should I do next? Subtract 36. So x squared plus x minus 12 is equal to 0. From here we factor. What are two factors of negative 12 that add to 1? 4 and negative 3. Awesome. So x plus 4 and x minus 3 equals 0. We set them both equal to 0. So x plus 4 equals 0. X is equal to negative 4. X minus 3 equals 0. So x is equal to positive 3. What do I have to do next? Plug them in. What am I plugging it into? What do I need to check for when I have fractions? What are we checking for? Can't have 0 in the denominator. So we need to plug them both in to make sure neither one gives us 0 in the denominator. So when I plug in negative 4 minus 3 is not 0. We're good there. If I plug in negative 4 plus 3, not 0. So good there. Negative 4 squared would be 16 minus 9, not 0. Awesome. So negative 4 works. Let's plug in 3 now. What's 3 minus 3? 0. So is 3 one of our answers? No, it's an extraneous solution. Extraneous solution. Every question like this on the test will say, check for extraneous solutions. We were even nice enough to remind you to check in the directions. So make sure you read the directions, check for extraneous solutions. When you have factors, you can't get 0 in the denominator. When you have fractions, When you have fractions, you can't get 0 in the denominator. So if you plug it in, it ends up being 0. You know that it does not work. So our only answer here is negative 4. Okay, so first thing we want to do is find all the factors of our denominators. So let's factor the third one. What are two factors of 12 that add to 7? 3 and 4. So this factors into x plus 3 and x plus 4. So what's our least common denominator? X plus 3 and x plus 4. So next we want to multiply by what's missing. So what's missing from my first denominator that's in my least common denominator? X plus 3. What's missing from the next one? X plus 4. And nothing's missing from the third. So in the equation that I write, it's going to be 5x times x plus 3. Negative 3x times x plus 4 is equal to 2. So let's write out our equation. 5x times x plus 3 minus 3x times x plus 4 is equal to 2. What do we do next?
5x squared.
Distribute. We're going to distribute to simplify. 5x squared plus 15x minus 3x squared minus 12x is equal to 2. What do we do next?
GTO.
No. Combine like terms. So they're on the same side, so we just subtract them. So this would be 2x squared. This would be plus 3x is equal to 2. What's next?
Bring the 2 over and factor.
Subtract the 2 over and factor.
There's so much room for error.
Practice makes perfect. 2 times negative 2 would be negative 4. Do we have two factors of negative 4 that add to 3? 4 and negative 1. Perfect. So this factors into x plus 4 and x minus 1. What do I have to do next? Don't forget to divide by 2. Since we started with multiplying, we have to remember to divide. So x plus 2 times 2x minus 1. Now we can set them both equal to 0. So x plus 2 equals 0 and 2x minus 1 equals 0. So x is equal to negative 2 and x is equal to 1/2. Now if I get 2 answers with my fraction questions, what do I have to do? Check. What are we checking for? Extraneous solutions. We can't have 0 in the denominator. We're going to check them both. We can't have 0 in the denominator. So if I plug in negative 2, yeah, just into the denominator. Negative 2 plus 4, is that 0? No, we're good. Negative 2 plus 3, is that 0? We're good. And this one is the same factor, so it's not 0, so we're good there too. So negative 2 works. Yeah, you just have to lightly plug it in and check. So if we have a fraction next, let's plug in 1/2. 1/2 plus 4, does that work? Yeah, it's not 0. 1/2 plus 3, does that work? Yeah, not 0. So we're good there too. So they both work.
What if it doesn't work?
On the next page, 17 is our compound inequality. So we want to get x alone in the middle, so we have to undo everything to it. So what should I do first? We're going to add 6, but make sure you add it to the right side and the left side. So this is kind of like 2 equations in one, or 2 inequalities in one. So we just have to add it to both sides. So we get negative 4 is less than or equal to 2x, which is less than 18. What do we do next? Divide by 2. So we're going to divide everything by 2. Make sure you do it on both sides. So we get negative 2 is less than or equal to x, which is less than 9. All right, so here on our number line, we need 2 values. Make sure your smaller one is to the left. So negative 2 and 9. At negative 2, am I going to put an open circle or a closed circle? Closed circle. At 9, do I have an open circle or closed circle? Open circle. Now let's see if we're going to highlight in between our 2 numbers or outside. So let's plug in a number, see if it makes sense. I can plug in, what's a number in between negative 2 and 9? 1, sure. Is negative 2 less than or equal to 1? Does that make sense? Yeah. Is 1 less than 9? Yeah. So where do you think I'm going to highlight? Inside. Since 1 was inside, and it's true, we color in between our 2 points. Now let's write our interval notation. Where does our graph start? Negative 2. Does it get a parentheses or bracket? Bracket, because it's a closed circle at negative 2. Where does our graph end? 9. Does 9 get a parentheses or bracket? Parentheses, because it's an open circle at 9. So this is our graph and our interval notation. These are the 2 parts to your answer. All right, 19. 19 is our non-linear inequality because we have an x squared. So what should we do first when we have an x squared and an x? What do we do? I have to move everything to one side. So I'm going to subtract 18. So you have x squared minus 3x minus 18 is less than or equal to 0. Now what are we going to do? We need to factor. What are two factors of negative 18 that add to negative 3? Negative 6 and positive 3. So this would be x minus 6 and x plus 3 is less than or equal to 0. Now from here we can just set each piece equal to 0 because we're going to figure out our inequality at the end. So we have x minus 6 is equal to 0 and x plus 3 is equal to 0. We're just finding our key values here. So x is equal to positive 6 and x is equal to negative 3. So let's put those on the number line. Which one's going to go further to the left? Negative 3 and 6. At negative 3 and 6, do I have an open circle or closed circle? Closed, because it is less than or equal to. That equal to means that we put a closed circle. Next, we want to figure out if we're going to highlight in between these two values or outside. So let's test a number in between. What's a number in between negative 3 and 6? 0. Awesome. We like picking 0 to plug in. It just makes it easier. So let's plug it into the original. We have 0 squared minus 3 times 0 is less than or equal to 18. So 0 is less than or equal to 18. Is this true? Yes. So I'm going to highlight in between or outside? In between, since it was true. Now let's write our interval. Where does our graph start? Negative 3. Do I put a bracket or parentheses? Bracket. Negative 3. Where does our graph end? 6. And 6 also gets bracket because it's a closed circle. So here's our interval notation, and here is our graph. All right, let's also do 20. What should I do first for 20? If we know that we have to factor, what do we need to do? Not yet. Subtract 3. We have to move everything to one side first. So we have 2x cubed plus 3x squared minus 2x minus 3 is greater than 0. Now we have 4 terms. How do I factor with 4 terms? Grouping. Group the first 2, group the second 2. What's the GCF for my first group? X squared. So I'm going to take out an x squared, and I'm left with 2x plus 3. What's the GCF for my second group? Negative 1, perfect. We need the inside parentheses to be the same, so I have to flip the signs. So this turns to negative. We take out a negative 1, it turns to 2x plus 3. So now that our insides are exactly the same, we're going to group those together, 2x plus 3. What goes into the second group? X squared minus 1. Can we factor this anymore? How? X squared minus 1 is the difference of squares, so what does it factor into? Awesome. X plus 1 and x minus 1. So we have 2x plus 3 times x plus 1 times x minus 1. We can just say that it's equal to 0 for now because we're going to figure out the inequality part once we put it on our line. So I want to set each one equal to 0. We have 2x plus 3 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0, and x minus 1 equals 0. So x is equal to negative 3 over 2, x is equal to negative 1, and x is equal to positive 1. So here we have 3 numbers that go on our number line. Which one am I going to put first? Awesome. Negative 3 over 2 is smaller than negative 1 because it's like negative 1.5. So we have negative 1.5, or we could say 3 over 2. I'll leave it as 3 over 2. Negative 1 and positive 1. So here we have to check each interval to see what works. It's not just an in-between or outside here because we might have in between 2 but outside of another one. So we just need to check by plugging in a number in each interval. So let's plug in something smaller than negative 3 over 2. What's smaller than negative 3 over 2? Negative 2. So let's plug in negative 2. We have 2 times negative 2 cubed plus 3 times negative 2 minus 2 times negative 2 is greater than 3. So this would give us negative 16 minus 6 plus 4 is greater than 3. Negative 8.
Negative 16.
Negative 2 cubed would be negative 8. Negative 8 times 2 is negative 16.
Didn't you have to cube square root the second time? The 3 times negative 2.
Oh yeah, this is squared. Thank you. So that would be 4 times 3 would be 12, so plus 12. So this would be 0 is greater than 3. Is that true?
No.
No. So we're not shading out here. I'm going to skip plugging in a number in between negative 3/2 and negative 1 just because it's all fractions in between. But let's go to our next interval. Let's plug in something in between negative 1 and 1. What's in between negative 1 and 1? 0. So let's plug in 0. So we have 2 times 0 cubed plus 3 times 0 squared minus 2 times 0 is greater than 3. So 0 is greater than 3. Is that true? No. So we're not highlighting out here. So let's plug in a number that's greater than 1. What's number greater than 1? 2. So let's plug in 2. We have 2 times 2 cubed plus 3 times 2 squared minus 2 times 2 is greater than 3. So this would be 16 plus 12 minus 4 is greater than 3. 28 minus 4 would be 24 is greater than 3. Is that true? Yes. And then just for the sake of time, if we plugged in a fraction in between negative 1 and negative 2/3, it's going to work too. Test a number and tell me. You will have to on the test to check and see if it works. Check every single gap that you have. So lastly, let's put our points. We have 3 points here. Are they all going to be open circles or closed circles? Open, because it's just a greater than sign. So I have an open circle here, an open circle here, and an open circle here. I'm going to highlight in between these 2 points because I plugged in a fraction and it worked. And then I'm going to highlight to the right here because I plugged in 2 and it worked. Now we have to write our interval. We have 2 parts to our graph, so we know that we're going to have 2 intervals. What's my first one going to be? Do we start with a parentheses or bracket? Parentheses. And what's our smallest number that our graph hits here? Negative 3 over 2. Now for your interval, remember, you go from smallest to largest, so I would start from the left to right. So our graph starts at negative 3 over 2, and then it goes to what? Negative 1. Negative 1's also going to get a parentheses. So our graph stops here, so I have to stop my interval here. I'm going to put a union to combine the next part. Where does my graph pick up again? 1. And it goes to what?
Infinity.
To infinity. So if you need to, just look at your graph going from left to right. Hover your pencil over it going from left to right, because your interval is going to go from smallest to largest. So where your graph starts, start at -3/2, that's where our interval starts. Then we stop here. We have a gap in our graph, so I need to stop my interval and then pick up again where the graph starts again.
There's not going to be some test.
There might be. What should I do first for 18? If x is being divided by 2, how do I get rid of it? Multiply. So I'm going to multiply everything here by 2, the left side times 2, and the right side times 2. Now multiplying the middle times 2 just cancels out with the dividing 2 on the bottom. Everything else stays the same in the middle. 1 times 2 would be 2, so 2 is less than 3x minus 1, which is less than or equal to 10. What would we do next? Add 1 to both sides. So technically we're adding it to 3 sides here because it's going to cancel out in the middle. So we get 3 is less than 3x, which is less than or equal to 11. What do we do next? Divide by 3. So 1 is less than x, which is less than or equal to 11/3. So let's put those on our number line. Which one's smaller? 1. So we have 1 to the left, 11/3 to the right. 11/3 is about how much? Yeah, kind of. It's like we can say 3.8-ish. 3 point something. It's almost 4. All right, so let's plug in numbers and see where we're going to highlight. Before I do that, though, is 1 going to get an open circle or closed circle? Open circle, because it's just a less than sign. There's no equal to part there, so an open circle. Is 11/3 going to get open or closed? Closed circle. All right, let's plug in numbers. What's a number smaller than 1? 0. So let's plug in 0 and see if it works. I could just plug it into here if I wanted to. Is 1 less than 0? We're just looking at this part here. Is 1 less than 0? No. What's a number in between 1 and 3.8-ish? 2. Let's plug in 2. So if I plug in 2, which is in the middle here, is 1 less than 2? Is 2 less than 3.8? Yep. So where am I going to highlight? In the middle. So how would I write my interval notation? Where does my graph start? 1. Do I put a parentheses or bracket there? Parentheses, 1. Where does my graph end? 11/3. Does that get a parentheses or bracket? Bracket, because it's a closed circle. So this is part of our answer, and this is part of our answer.